Do so. Right. And can everyone see my screen? I don't know that I need to share too much. I've got an agenda. Okay. Sounds great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks. All right, it's 10 o'clock, and I see a number of us in the call ready to go for the Public Charter School webinar info session for today. Let me start by introducing sort of the people who are going to be giving a little bit of information from the OPI and the Board of Public Ed as well. But let me introduce them, we'll kind of introduce ourselves, and then I'd love everyone who are charter schools, if you could just sort of pop in, say your name and your role at your charter school, just so we know who's here and we can sort of tailor our remarks to you as needed. I'll start off. Good morning, everyone. I'm Christy Mockstutz. I'm the Assistant Superintendent here at the OPI, and we're glad to have you joining us this morning. Public charter schools are new this year, and we're very glad that you were able to join us to be able to ask some questions if you have them on all sorts of important details such as enrollments, accreditation, assessments, those types of things. We're here to talk to you about that a little bit today. So OPI folks, if you would sort of maybe just go around the circle and introduce yourselves. Julia, I see you first up on my screen, so maybe we'll start with Julia.
Hi, my name is Julia Caro, and I'm new at the OPI, and I am the Data Operations Senior Manager. And I'm happy to be here with you today.
Thanks, Julia. Marcy?
Hi, folks. I'm Marcy Fortner. I'm with the Assessment Unit, so here to help you answer questions about statewide assessments.
Thanks, Marcy. Nicole?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Thuat. I am the AIM Unit Manager here at OPI.
Thanks, Nicole. And another, I think I see Enli on. Enli, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I am Enli Kobus. I'm the Central Services Division Research Analyst, and I'm not sure why I'm here.
And Enli has helped put our internal processes together and the open school process and the forms and getting everything ready for the new charter schools as they opened this spring. She had a very heavy lift in that. So thanks, Enli. Then I would just like to introduce one person on the call. I see from the Board of Public Education. Jenny, if you want to introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jenny Moran Butcher. I just started on with the Board of Public Ed last week, and I am going to be supporting the board in the application process for public charter schools and the reporting process for our current opening charter schools.
Thanks, Jenny. And then I would just love for everyone to just say your name real quick. You can just sort of pop in informally, say your name and your role and your school, just so we know who's here. And again, can kind of tailor questions as needed. So go ahead and jump in. Maybe start with Gary.
Sure. I'm Gary Myers with the Helena Public Schools, the Director of Educational Technology.
Morning, I'm Craig Van Nuys. I'm the CFO with Billings Public Schools.
Hi, I'm Denise Williams, and I'm with Missoula County Public Schools.
I'm Tiffany Brown. I'm with Missoula County Public Schools as well.
I'm Jill Huger-Heidi. I'm with the East Helena School District.
Gordon Klasman, Executive Director of Secondary Education for Billings Public Schools.
Shauna Anderson I'm Business Manager and Clerk from Frenchtown.
My name is Dan Rispin, Superintendent in East Helena.
Hey,
Jason Platt, Director of Technology for Billings Public Schools.
I'm Ryan Wells, with the Bitterroot Polytech Hamilton School District.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. I think we heard you.
Hi, I'm Jolene Tolinar, and I have Pete Joseph with me. We're Corvallis. This is my superintendent. I'm the business manager clerk.
Thanks. Good to see you again. All right. I think that was everyone. And I realized the executive director of the Board of Public Education, McCall Flynn, is also on the call. Sorry, McCall, I just didn't see that you were on there. So I wanted everyone to know that you were there. You're welcome to say hi if you'd like to.
No worries. Thanks, everyone. Nice to see you.
All
This
right.
is Geraldine from Billings Public Schools also.
Oh, great. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. All right. Well, we're going to kick it off with, I'm going to just toss it over to Nicole to chat a little bit about enrollment counts in AIM. If you have any questions, again, this is the format for those questions, but we'll start with Nicole. She can give you a little bit of information as we head into that fall count day here on October 7th. Thanks, Nicole. Oh, and sorry, Crystal Andrews from Accreditation is also on the call. Thanks, Crystal. Go ahead, Nicole.
Good morning, everyone. I've taken lots of calls from many of you regarding the charter schools. So at this point, we have enrollments, I believe, in nearly all of the charter schools. And I think the biggest or the largest number of questions have been what to do with enrollments when you have students who are taking classes at both the charter school and at other schools within the district. And I think we've addressed most of those. So those enrollments then get split based on a primary or a secondary enrollment. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have regarding those enrollments at this point.
So I guess, Nicole, our question is, when you say the enrollment is split, that means the A and B attribution is split as well, affecting the student count in the charter school. Is that accurate?
That's correct, yes. And I do believe the MCA does ask that the A and B be accounted for separately in the charter school and the regular schools of the district for budgeting purposes, as is considered a separate budget unit.
Okay, that's how we interpreted it too.
Okay.
So sorry, this is Josh. Can I clarify that a little bit just to make sure I understand that? We're still using the 4 enrollment accounts for aggregate hours. Is that true?
That's correct, yes.
And so then it's, full-time 720 plus, then you got 3/4 time, the 540, 360, 180, that kind of thing. And so
Correct.
Then what you're saying, and see if I'm wrong, is like if we have a partial enrollment in one school, it can be the 180 added to the 3/4 and make a full-time student for the district.
That's correct, yes.
So then we need to make sure that we fractionalize that appropriately, not to go past a full-time A and B.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. All right.
For my clarification,
go ahead.
With my clarification would be, so if we have 80 kids enrolled in a charter school and they spend half their time in one of our residential high schools and half the time in the charter school, is that I'm thinking more like the basic entitlement, because you have to have, at least 41 or whatever to be, to get that. Does that only count as 40 kids if the 80 kids are only there half time?
So correct, there is a distinction between enrollment and A and B. So, and I think that's where maybe Crystal Andrews can speak to a little bit on the accreditation side, because for some purposes we have enrollment and for some purposes we have A and B.
Okay.
So for the basic entitlement piece, that's calculated on A and B. For other things like FTE for library, curriculum, counseling, administration, that's all based on enrollment. So yes, that is a distinction, is A and B versus enrollment.
So you're saying the basic entitlement will be determined based on the A and B?
That is correct, yes.
So then that does mean like a half student in a half student and a half student make a whole A and B, which means we need to have over 10 kids per grade level, basically, or the 41 in a high school, right?
Correct. So for example, 70 for an elementary program, if you had quarter time enrolled students, you would need 280 to meet the 70 A and B, roughly.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I got that clearly answered. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Is the attendance counting going to impact any of that? Our charter schools are really proficiency based, and so they won't have attendance the same way that our residential schools do. Will that impact anything with our count?
So your attendance does not affect your student count for A and B. There are other rules for proficiency, so you would count them, you know, if for example, you had a quarter class that went over the October count date. If the student finished September 30th, they're still counted as enrolled for the entire period, even though you've granted them credit for that over through the end of that quarter, for example.
So it's really the amount of engagement that we have for the time, not the actual. I guess when we do a block system, our engagement with the student will still be over the length of a regular school day. It's just that they'll be working on maybe 1 or 2 courses at a time with intensity for that time frame. So then their actual engagement in school will be full day. But then, yeah, it looks a lot different than class periods that we report in like the, you know, I want to say team structure, but that's old language now, you know, but the class structure will read a lot differently because those classes are a lot longer in engagement. We did want to ask about proficiency reporting to make sure we can talk about that eventually. Maybe that might not be right now.
It could be, Josh, but I think you're right. I think when we get to the accreditation and maybe the performance framework pieces, that might be where that kind of fits in a little bit. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Could I clarify a scenario? At Hamilton, we may have a student who's just in one course that's in our Polytech side of Infinite Campus and say 5 courses with the Hamilton High School side. Obviously that one course wouldn't meet the 0.25 threshold. They need to be in 2 courses to meet the 0.25 threshold, but they're in 5 courses on the other side. So they're a full-time student with the Hamilton School District, but according to count, they would be 0.75 in Hamilton High, and they wouldn't meet the threshold for 0.25 in the Polytech. So I'm just curious how that's going to work. What's going to happen there?
I think it's up to the district to decide how to split that A and B. I mean,
so we have to enroll this. So in Infinite Campus, we have to put the student in the Polytech class for the one, but they won't meet the threshold for 0.25 for funding for A and B, and then they won't meet the threshold for full-time enrollment, if I'm thinking about this correctly, for the other classes. So it's not like we're just putting them in IC where we're supposed to, but then when it comes to count, I'm worried that they're not going to count for a full-time student, even though they are.
You can give me a call after this is over, and I'm more than happy just to take a look at your calendar and your setup and figure out what we can do. Looking at that and what it'll calculate at.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Nicole. Any other questions for enrollment as we approach this fall count day? All right. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for being available. Nicole's team is always available for questions. I know a lot of you are familiar with her and her team, and they're there. So please reach out with emails or questions. They're happy to help. And with these very, particular sort of unique circumstances, they're real happy to jump on a call with you and walk you through that. So thank you, Nicole, and your team for being available for that.
Agreed. Thanks a lot, Nicole, for helping us. You're great.
All right, next on the agenda, we talked proper data reporting and aim for assessment and accreditation purposes. So I know we have Marcy Fortner on the call and we have Crystal Andrews on the call. Crystal, I didn't introduce you earlier, just very quickly, but Crystal Andrews, if you wanted to pop in, say hello and just talk a little bit about the accreditation perspective from what these fall enrollment counts will, pertain to for, especially for our charter schools, that would be great. So we'll start with accreditation and Crystal.
Great, thanks, Christy. Crystal Andrews, I am the Accreditation and Licensure Senior Manager. I am learning with you all with charters. This is all new to everyone, so bear with me. But in terms of reporting, I believe, Nicole, you know this better than me. It's the same as you do for your districts, as Nicole was talking about counts and such and how to split it. And in terms of accreditation for this year, for the charters, you'll be doing, and do you want me to get into that now, Christy, or is that not?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Okay.
That would be great. Yep. Thanks.
I figured, but well, number one, since I have all of your attention, our criterion reference guide will be released for this year on Monday. The press release will go out, but the criterion reference guide will tell you everything that will be due for accreditation for this school year. So that will come out this coming Monday. And that will also go for your charters. Charters will be responsible for completing all of this year's and last year's information. The rubrics will be updated for last year as well. I think it'd be good, and I'd have no problem doing a little accreditation webinar for just charters, just to explain exactly what will be due for this year. It doesn't need to be right here and now, but once we have those criterion reference guides released next week, I think it'd be great to schedule something, Christy, just so that it's real clear on what's expected. But other than that, I think all of you are within a district, so you saw what was last year. This year, it is similar, but not the same, different expectations in terms of the ISAP, and so that'll be real clear on what will be due for this year.
Thanks, Crystal. And Josh, you had a question, so I think maybe that might kind of tie in a little bit to hear kind of what we were talking about.
Okay. Did you say different expectations on the ASVAB, or did I hear that wrong, Crystal, at the end? I didn't.
Nope, the ISAP.
Okay,
Integrated
ISAP.
Strategic
Yeah, I just
ASVAB.
didn't hear the initials.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
ISAP. Good, thanks. Perfect.
And not different expectations, just a combination of both last
Yep.
year's information and this year's.
Okay.
Oh, and I
Ju-
see
Julie.
Julie, you've got your hand up. Welcome, Julie,
Yeah,
our
I
Chief
just
Program
wanted to-
Officer.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add a couple things on the accreditation component. 5 of you have variants to standards to the accreditation process already in your charter school application and approved. If you determine that for your charter school, you want to seek a variance to standard based on what you're seeing in your enrollment counts, or things that are happening with the course offerings, and those kinds of components there. If you need any kind of variance to any of the standards, those are due the first, the second, right after, Crystal, I'm thinking it's like the
Second Monday. Second Monday, so the
Monday of
14th.
October. And then if that's approved by the Variance to Standards Board, then it would take effect for the whole school year. So as you're looking at all of those enrollment counts and how those might affect your some of your accreditation pieces as you're putting them into Infinite Campus, please be looking for that if that's an opportunity you need to take advantage of. So I might be thinking, for example, there is a rule for the high school that you can't have more than 90 students on your roster as an English teacher for writing. So if that's something that you're going to want to have as a waiver, you're going to want to address that through your variance to standard process. And Crystal has all of that information on the website. But I just would be really thoughtful around watching you guys. You're creating very innovative and I think models that really meet the needs of students in some different ways. So don't hesitate to utilize that process when you're trying to fit a different kind of school model into this framework, because we will accredit each charter school by itself, separate from the other schools. So for example, if you were previously an alternative school attached to a high school, you now will have your own accreditation process. So all those rules will be applying to your high school. I hope that helps a little bit, but I just want you to be taking a looking at that and encouraging you to be thinking about if there's anything in terms of graduation offerings, graduation credits, any of the ratios, be looking at those standards and thinking about variance to standards at the same time. But those of you who've already got 5 in approved by the board, those will be applied in this year's process. Thanks.
And then, and just to add on to that, for these charter schools, you're going through the same accreditation process for as for your other schools, as we're discussing, but also there are some performance frameworks that will have some slightly different information that I know that you've heard of, I think, directly from the Board of Public Education. But we've been working together with the Board of Public Education and supporting that process too. So there are some of those additional information that you'll be sharing out. And I think that goes to that attendance and engagement question. You'll be able to provide some evidence on for your students that are enrolled in these schools, their engagement pieces. And that comes kind of through those performance frameworks as well. So hopefully that answers that too. Great. Any other accreditation questions? And Crystal, I think it's a great idea to do a very specific accreditation webinar for our public charter schools. That would be great. So again, I will send out information on that. We'll also have that posted on our public charter webpage in order for that coming up. So we'll make sure you all know that. Yeah, Josh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. This question might have just been answered, but I kind of want to reframe it and see what Julie and Crystal and you all think, if that's what we should pursue. And Gary, please help me with articulating this question if I miss parts of it. So like with our PAL charter school, we've been working with a proficiency-based model for some time, but we've been fitting it into the container of reporting like section by section by section frequently. And it's quite challenging. So for example, they'll do mini blocks 12 a year. And so then we've been uploading or trying to upload that into Infinite Campus times the amount of classes per kid. And it's really been a proficiency-based model where when they show proficiency in that subject area, that we award credit that way. So when you hear Julie talk, maybe that's a good example of applying for a variance to standard for that, though we haven't done that yet. I don't think we haven't put that request in. The other thing where it comes troubling or difficult for us is to justify the CTE numbers for the allocation of Perkins funding, because then you got to get those counts right for how much time they participate in a career work job experience, but the whole program is geared toward getting employment later, but then you're trying to literally fill the classes of English, the credits they need combined with the CTE, but each one of those efforts is like a career pathway educational system. So it really, when we do these variants to standards or submit things differently, it just is really hard to get like the counts for CTE classes in to then get the appropriate amount of CTE funding for that program. So it's always been difficult with how to do it. And then so I guess what I'm trying to articulate is like, if we do a variance to standard, it's how do we make sure that like our CTE funding is also allocated like it should be, that kind of thing. So we got more than one thing going on, and then they end up being tied together. And then how it comes out on how it's interpreted, we want to make sure on the front end that we got it right. And it's just been a challenge over the years to input all of that information and be flexible with what the kid needs next. With so many mini blocks offered. So anyways, that's kind of the situation. I more of the described a situation than ask a good question. So if you have guidance or thoughts or what we should try to do, that'd be nice.
Well, and just to add on to what Josh is saying, I think I can articulate that into a question. I think the question is just what's the proper way for us to report the teacher class arrangement and the teacher class uploads for our proficiency-based PAL charter. So how do we correctly upload that information into Infinite Campus so that it reflects both the instruction that we're having as well as the proficiency-based nature of the charter itself?
So you guys, I think that's a really good question. So when you go to put that into the Infinite Campus, it may be worth, calling and having a separate meeting with Nicole to be taking a look at that. And we certainly can put a accreditation specialist at the same time. Ellery and, Nicole could probably sit together to look at it, because what you want to know is that you're reporting it, right, the way that it needs to be in IC, but then that the way that in which the data is utilized for accreditation purposes matches what the intention of the program is, because you don't want to be in a situation where, for example, you're going to get not credit because you didn't meet the program offerings because the way in which you inputted that into Infinite Campus. It isn't necessarily the way in which you might have implemented it in the school and the way that it's playing out. It really needs to mirror that, right? So that the way in which you input it, if that means that it's going to cause the data to look like you're not providing all those program areas, we probably need to talk about that, because we're going to want you to apply for a variance to standard. But I think what I hear both of you saying, Josh and Gary, is that as well, when you're thinking about the data that you're putting into Infinite Campus, it has much more implications beyond just accreditation purposes.
Right.
Which could be like what we were talking about, which is A and B, which could be the quality educator payment. I mean, there's a lot of other purposes that are utilized and data pulled from that Infinite Campus. So it isn't just a one singular, you input it this way for this purpose without recognizing it could have consequences on something else. So I just would encourage you, when you go to put that in, to just give the team a call to say, is this the way that this is, does this reflect what we're doing out in the school? And is this going to lead to any consequences that we haven't thought about in accreditation or in enrollment or in anything else? Because if so, especially for accreditation, you want to be ahead of the curve and get in that variance to standard. Does that make sense? Because we don't want to, we want to leverage the policies not to be barriers, but to incentivize the innovation that you're doing in the charters. I hope that answers the question. I think it's just really hard until you see it laid out in Infinite Campus of how it's reading.
And Julie, I really like the idea of maybe offering up Nicole and Ellery to sort of meet with the district to kind of talk through this, I think, from that accreditation standpoint and from the AIM standpoint. So I think that would be a good follow-up for you all.
Yes, and we worked with Nicole quite a bit last year on that, and we were able to get it, to an acceptable spot. This year will look a little different because we have a specific charter school calendar for PAL that we didn't, we have an actual school for PAL we didn't have before. So that will help with that. But I think we're also a little bit leery, and Josh may be able to speak to this more than I can, but we're a little bit leery because of the way that the Infinite Campus into the accreditation system worked last year. There were a lot of technical issues that made that a challenge to correct things that were, that came up later. And so we want to try and stay ahead of those type of issues so that we're not in a spot where it's really, really a challenge to go back and those were not things that we needed variances for. They were just sort of data glitches with reporting that was a real challenge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just add, I think like Nicole and Ellery have been extremely helpful. It's just like what we're trying to do is put in data that we think is going to happen, but we have a charter school that's going to adapt its offerings to the kids' needs. And so down the road, we won't be offering what we put in October, and the counts won't be the same. But so it's a really, in a traditional high school, we can put in a semester at a time and generally say this is what we have. In a charter school, we're changing what our staff are doing based on the child's needs at the time. And then so literally 3 weeks to the next 3 weeks, they're different. And so then we're just trying to make sure we get the stuff in right so that it's interpreted correctly. And then we also have dilemmas with, literally if we put in the first 6 weeks of school, that looks like, and then you'd have to forecast what we think CTE will be down the road. And anyways, but those two are really good. I mean, we've gotten great service from them on that. It's just maybe we're looking for a better pathway if we maybe thinking if we had a one upload with a proficiency based description variance that we wouldn't need to input all of that information and have it be confusing or misread because it's impossible to get right because we need to do it 12 times, over the course of the year. That's kind of the deal. But yeah, Nicole and Ellery have been really creative and supportive, but we can go back to that. I was just thinking maybe if they think there's a possible variance, a way we should write it, maybe we can use their brains to help us with that too, or yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Gary.
Yep.
All right, I think let's move on to assessment. I believe we have Marcy on the line. One thing, so Marcy, if you want to jump in and chat just a little bit about the assessment. Again, these are new charter schools, new schools this year for many of you in your district. And so with that comes some assessment considerations. And so I think Marcy is ready to speak about that a little bit.
And actually, Christy, I am unable to speak about it. Hi, everyone.
Sorry.
I'm Cedar Rose. Oh, you're
Thanks,
fine,
Cedar.
Christy. I'm the State Assessment Director for OPI. Hopefully this will be brief and easy. I think that Nicole laid the groundwork great. Really, the eligibility and requirements of statewide assessment, including MAST, ACT, Montana Science Assessment, our access for ELLs, and any of our alternate assessments lies with the enrollment type within Infinite Campus AIM. So for our purposes, we identify students who are eligible and required to take those statewide assessments with that primary enrollment type. So any student within your charter school, your charter or your schools as a whole, wherever that primary enrollment lies with that school, those students will automatically be enrolled within and uploaded into their testing portal that they need to be tested with. And therefore, the testing responsibility goes where that primary enrollment is. So I know that some of our charter schools may have a student with a primary and then a secondary enrollment. That student's data and assessment will be the responsibility of the school that has that primary enrollment. If you have a student that doesn't have a primary enrollment, they are not eligible or required to take those statewide assessments. We do those uploads into our testing portals on a regular basis leading up to our administration and then on a daily basis through administration. So if you do have an enrollment change throughout that time, we're able to catch it within about 48 hours. But feel free to reach out to the OPI Assessment Help Desk if you have any questions about this, or if you have a student who you feel like should be in a testing portal that's not there, and we can troubleshoot with you and make sure that we get connected to the right folks to make sure your kiddos who should be testing are testing.
Thanks, Cedar. Any particular questions for assessment? I think most of them looked pretty good, Cedar, when you were checking over. I think we're in pretty good shape for all of our public charter schools. It sounds like you've done some outreach already with all the schools. So I think that is pretty well ready, set to go. Okay. Well, we're to the Q&A session. We've sort of done questions and answers along the way. Are there any other questions that we didn't address that you would like to have answers to from the group? Great. Does not seem like it. I think we've come pretty close to the half an hour time frame here. So thank you all for joining us. Again, I'll put this recording up on the Public Charter School website. We'll make sure that's there. And you've got all of the contact information from everyone here at the OPI. I've heard a lot of you say that the staff here has been very helpful, and we're really glad to hear that. Please just reach out anytime. Reach out to me. I'm happy to forward you on to the person who can help you if I can't get to the direct answer right away. But we're here to help and support and make things as smooth as possible for all of you with our new public charter schools this year. Thanks to the Board of Public Education for joining us this morning as well. This is a real work between the two of us, and we're glad that you were able to join us as well this morning. So with that, we'll end for the day. Again, reach out anytime. Thanks everyone for joining. Good to see all of you.